Welcome to Boots on the Ground Oil and Gas, Episode 3, Electric Vehicles, a Threat to the Oil Industry or Not? We have an interesting topic today. The advent of mass-produced electric vehicles in recent years has stirred up discussion of electric vehicles threatening the oil industry with a reduction in gasoline demand. I've read quite a few different sources on this, several different analysts, and of course the opinions differ quite a bit. Some will say that electric cars are going to be surpassing gasoline cars in just a few years, and others have the total opposite opinion, and then there's quite a few that range within those two extremes. Before I go any further in discussion, I will say that the topic of electric vehicles versus gasoline vehicles does have some political undertones to it, and at Boots on the Ground we do not engage in direct political discussion, so we'll just keep it solely on the topic of energy, and we don't drift into politics. Electric vehicles seem popular in news coverage, which gives the appearance that electric vehicles will become mainstream and will potentially dethrone gasoline, meaning oil, as the dominant transportation energy source. For this to happen, EVs, electric vehicles, will have to overcome some pretty serious barriers. The first hurdle that has to be overcome for EVs to pose any serious threat to oil is basic economics. Consumers will ultimately make their purchasing decisions based on getting the best value for their hard-earned dollars. Some consumers will ultimately purchase an EV for the sheer novelty or attention or their environmental beliefs, regardless of cost. But most average consumers can't afford to make purchases in this manner. They're going to be always concerned with cost and getting the most for their dollar. EVs as a whole are more expensive than gasoline cars. The prices have come down, but they are still significantly more expensive than gasoline cars, and also receive government subsidies, typically in the form of tax credits or tax deductions, that if you didn't have those, the true cost of an EV would be even higher than it already is. At Boots on the Ground, we don't view EVs as an environmental miracle where we can have modern, convenient, and comfortable transportation without any environmental effects. There's always an effect. So basically the old saying, there's no free lunch. You pay somewhere. The manufacturing of electric cars has a significant CO2 footprint. And then additionally, the manufacturing of the batteries that go into the EV cars has a high CO2 footprint also. And this is often an unmentioned aspect. And in addition to the batteries and the manufacturing cost, there's an energy cost to charging all these electric vehicles once they're out in the marketplace, out in use. Where does the energy come from? In our current electrical grid, most electricity is still generated by coal or natural gas. Even though there is some advent of other sources of electricity, but coal and natural gas are still the bulk producers of electricity. So greater amounts of fossil fuels would have to be burned to power this new fleet of EVs, making the CO2 savings over gasoline cars really non-existent once you count the amount of coal and natural gas that has to be burned to generate the extra electricity. I can imagine some people would say, though, well, if we made the electric grid completely powered by wind and solar, then we could reduce CO2 levels significantly and eliminate some use of oil. And I would say on paper or in theory, yes, I would agree with you. That would work. Except that solar and wind have some major limitations, as in the sun is not out at nighttime and wind does not always blow. I mean, those are just some practical limitations that would be difficult to overcome. Additionally, who would pay for the massive amounts of wind and solar power plants that would be needed to replace all the natural gas and coal power plants in the world. I mean, you're talking about a significant energy replacement, and who pays for that? The governments, corporations, individual consumers. The cost would be significant. I haven't made any attempt to run the numbers because this would be a massive calculation project, but I would be safe to guess this would cost in the trillions of dollars. So again, where does the money come from for that? As a whole, we do not view EVs as a significant threat in the foreseeable future, but I will entertain the scenario of a greater prevalence of EVs in the global marketplace. What would be the impact here at Boots on the Ground? Certainly, if EVs gain a greater percentage of the auto marketplace, then there would be some downward pressure on crude oil prices in the form of reduced gasoline demand, and that would negatively impact us here with lower revenues. Even if EVs gain in greater numbers, we believe that they will not gain in greater percentage of the overall car market, meaning that EVs will grow in numbers on a straight line basis, but so will the number of gasoline powered cars. The number that we've seen, and this was from a somewhat reputable source, the numbers we've seen is somewhere in the ballpark of 2.8 billion, that's billion with a B, passenger cars and light trucks in use by the year 2040. This is double the current numbers, compared to a high estimate of 1 billion electric vehicles sold between now and 2050. So in 2050, that doesn't mean there's a billion electric vehicles in use. It means that many have been sold in that time frame. So if you do between 2050 and current, you would just take the 1 billion divided by, what is that, 33 years? So in every given year, you're only looking at a few million EVs versus how many billion gasoline cars. So that keeps EVs as a relative small percentage of the auto market. Also, one point I didn't mention earlier is that cars or light trucks are not the only consumer of oil and refined products. Air travel and shipping grows larger and larger every year. Airlines consume jet fuel in greater quantities year after year, and this can offset any reduction in oil demand by way of gasoline usage loss to EVs. And it's not really that feasible to electrify shipping and air travel. So I will stop at this point. I want to thank you for joining us here at Boots on the Ground Oil and Gas. Please feel free to comment and join us next time. Thank you so much.